Imagine you're the CEO of BMW. Your factories are still running. Your brand is still one of the most respected on earth. Your engineers are still some of the best in the world. But somewhere in China, something is happening that you cannot stop. Hundreds of thousands of cars are quietly leaving ports every single month. Not old cars, not cheap knockoffs, cars with better software than yours, cars with faster production lines than yours, cars that are starting to outsell you in markets you used to own. And every single one of those ships is carrying something far more dangerous than vehicles. They are carrying the future of the global auto industry. Picture the scene for a second. A port the size of a small city, rows of new cars stretching farther than you can see, cranes lifting them onto ships bound for Europe, Africa, Southeast Asia, South America. Meanwhile, across the world, a BMW factory runs at a fraction of its old capacity. A Ford plant sits quieter than it used to. Dealership lots in parts of Europe are emptier than they were 5 years ago. This is not a prediction. This is happening right now. And last month, China quietly crossed a milestone that almost nobody outside the industry noticed. It exported more than 1 million vehicles in a single month. Let that number sit for a second. 1 million cars in 30 days, sent to nearly every corner of the planet. That number does not just break a record, it rewrites the balance of power in one of the largest, most profitable, most politically important industries on Earth. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Most people still think this story is about cheap electric cars. It is not. It is about who controls manufacturing, batteries, software, and the next 50 years of global trade. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how this happened, who is losing, who is winning, and why almost nobody in the West is prepared for what comes next. You will understand why some of the most trusted names in the auto industry are quietly restructuring behind closed doors. You will understand why certain governments are suddenly treating car factories like national security assets. And you will understand why the next major shift in global wealth might already be underway, hiding in plain sight, inside an industry most people assume they already understand. So if you are the kind of person who wants to understand where the real money and the real power is moving before everyone else catches on, stay with me. Because what you're about to see is not just a story about cars. It is a story about the next century. Let's start with the number itself. Over 1 million vehicles, exported in a single month. Growth of over 70% compared to just a few years ago. This is not slow, steady growth. This is the fastest expansion any country has ever produced in the modern auto industry. Faster than Japan in the 1970s, faster than South Korea in the 1990s, faster than anything Detroit ever managed at its peak. Here's where things get worse before they get better. Because this milestone did not appear out of nowhere. It is the visible tip of a much larger pattern that has been building quietly for years. Export volumes have been climbing steadily, market by market, almost unnoticed by mainstream financial media until the total became too large to explain away. Markets that used to buy a handful of Chinese vehicles a year are now buying tens of thousands. Entire distribution networks have been built from scratch across Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia in the span of just a few years. So the obvious question is simple. Why are so many countries suddenly buying Chinese cars? The easy answer, the answer most people default to, is price. Cheaper cars, cheaper labor, cheaper components. But that answer is outdated. It was true a decade ago. It is not the full story anymore. Because these cars are not winning on price alone. They are winning because they are getting better. Better built, better software, longer range batteries, faster production cycles that let manufacturers update models almost every year instead of every 5 years. Interior technology that feels years ahead of what legacy automakers are shipping. Buyers in Thailand and Brazil and parts of Eastern Europe are not settling for a cheaper car. Many of them are choosing what they genuinely believe is the better product, and that distinction changes everything, because a cheap product can be beaten by a cheaper competitor. A better product cannot be beaten that easily, so if price isn't the whole story, what is? And that is where the real story begins. Here is what almost nobody outside the industry understands. This did not happen in 5 years. It did not happen because of one visionary founder or one lucky product launch. This was a 20-year strategy, built layer by layer on purpose. Start with batteries. While Western automakers spent 2 decades focused on selling more cars, China focused on something far less glamorous, owning the entire supply chain that makes batteries possible. Lithium, cobalt, nickel processing, refining capacity, battery cell manufacturing at a scale no other country has matched. Then layer on government incentives that push domestic manufacturers to compete aggressively with each other, which sounds risky, but created something powerful. Real competition inside China long before these companies ever tried to compete abroad. Then add manufacturing scale. Factories built not just to produce cars, but to produce them faster, cheaper, and with more automation than almost anywhere else on Earth. Robots on the line, vertically integrated suppliers sitting next door to the factories themselves, cutting shipping time and cost to almost nothing. Picture it like this. While most automakers were trying to sell more cars, China was trying to own every single part needed to build them. The mines, the refineries, the battery plants, the ports, the ships. That is not luck. That is infrastructure, built with intention over 2 decades. And here's the part Wall Street is only now starting to fully price in. This kind of vertical integration is incredibly difficult to replicate quickly. You cannot build a battery supply chain in 18 months. You cannot stand up a mining and refining operation overnight, no matter how much capital you throw at it. You cannot recreate 20 years of manufacturing learning curves with a single government subsidy program. That is exactly why Western automakers and Western governments have struggled to respond effectively. They are not just competing against cheaper cars. They are competing against a structural head start measured in decades, not quarters. Some analysts have compared it to trying to catch up to a company that started building the railroad while everyone else was still designing the train. And once that infrastructure existed, the price war was inevitable. Here's where it gets uncomfortable for investors. Once you control the entire supply chain, you can drop prices in ways your competitors physically cannot match. Picture a car that used to sell for $45,000. Then the price drops to $38,000, then $34,000, then $30,000. Consumers love this. Cheaper electric cars, more choice, more competition. But look at what is happening underneath the surface. Margins across the entire industry are shrinking. Companies like BYD can absorb thinner margins because they control battery production, raw material sourcing, and manufacturing costs from top to bottom. Companies like Tesla are being forced to cut prices repeatedly just to defend market share, especially across Asia and parts of Europe. Geely and SAC are expanding aggressively into export markets where price sensitivity is high and brand loyalty to Western automakers is much weaker. This is the part investors need to understand. A price war like this does not have a clean winner. Even the companies gaining market share are doing so at the cost of profitability. Eventually, someone has to blink. Someone has to slow down, consolidate, or exit certain markets entirely. And when margins get squeezed this hard, it eventually stops being a story about consumers getting better deals. It becomes a story about which company survives long enough to be standing when the dust settles. But lower prices create a much bigger problem than shrinking margins. They threaten something that used to feel untouchable. This is the part of the story that hits differently. For almost a century, 3 words meant something specific anywhere in the world. Made in Germany. It meant engineering. It meant prestige. It meant a car that justified its price simply by wearing the right badge. BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Volkswagen, Porsche. These were not just car companies. They were symbols of what precision manufacturing could achieve. Now, ask yourself an uncomfortable question. What happens when Chinese luxury and premium electric vehicles become good enough? Not identical, not superior in every category, just good enough that the badge alone stops justifying a 30 or 40% price premium. That is exactly what is starting to happen inside China itself. Historically, the most profitable market for German luxury brands. Market share for German automakers inside China has been declining year after year as domestic premium brands close the technology and quality gap. Meanwhile, competition is intensifying in markets across Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Europe, where these Chinese premium models are arriving with aggressive pricing and features that rival, and in some cases exceed, their German counterparts. For decades, German automakers could rely on brand loyalty to protect their margins, even when competitors caught up on raw specifications. That loyalty is not gone, but it is no longer unconditional. And once brand loyalty stops being unconditional, pricing power starts to erode with it. Now here's a question for you. If you had $40,000 in your pocket today, would you buy a German luxury car built on a legacy platform? Or a fully loaded Chinese electric vehicle packed with more screens, more range, and more software than anything else at that price point? Drop your answer in the comments, because the split on this question might surprise you. Here's the part most Americans get completely wrong. If you live in the United States, you probably have not seen many Chinese-branded electric vehicles on the road. That is not an accident. Tariffs on Chinese-made vehicles remain steep. Regulatory hurdles around safety certification, emission standards, and data security are significant. National security concerns around connected vehicle technology have made lawmakers cautious about allowing widespread market access. Trade restrictions specifically targeting Chinese automakers have effectively kept most of these vehicles out of American driveways. So it is easy to look at American roads and assume this entire story does not apply here. That would be a mistake, because Chinese manufacturers do not need to sell a single car directly in America to affect American drivers, American workers, and American investors. Here is how the pressure travels indirectly. Cheaper battery technology developed and scaled in China puts downward pricing pressure on battery costs globally, including components used by American manufacturers. Global pricing pressure created by Chinese exports in Europe, Latin America, and Asia forces American automakers to compete harder on price in every market outside the United States, squeezing global profitability. Supplier competition intensifies as Chinese component makers expand into markets that once relied exclusively on American and European suppliers. Global investment capital increasingly flows toward companies and regions, demonstrating the fastest growth and scale, which shifts long-term capital away from legacy Western automakers. So while the effect feels invisible on Main Street America today, it is already reshaping global supply chains, corporate earnings, and long-term investment decisions. Then there's the part almost nobody talks about on the news. Trade policy is not static. Tariff structures get renegotiated. Political administrations change. Industry lobbying shifts over time as domestic automakers weigh the benefits of protection against the benefits of access to cheaper components. None of this means the American market opens overnight, but it does mean the current wall of tariffs and restrictions should be understood as a policy choice, not a permanent law of physics. Policy choices can change faster than most people expect, especially when enough economic pressure builds up behind them. The insulation will not last forever, and the companies feeling this pressure most directly are not equally exposed. Let's go company by company quickly, because the exposure looks very different depending on who you are. Volkswagen. The largest single exposure among Western automakers, given how heavily its profitability has historically depended on the Chinese market, where domestic competitors are closing the gap fastest. BMW. Heavily dependent on Chinese consumers for premium sales volume, now facing direct competition from domestic premium and luxury EV brands inside the same market that used to be its biggest growth engine. Mercedes-Benz, facing similar luxury pressure, with its brand premium increasingly challenged by vehicles offering comparable technology and comfort at a lower price point. Ford, struggling with a transition to electric vehicles broadly, now facing a global pricing environment shaped by Chinese export competition in markets outside the United States. General Motors, historically reliant on joint ventures and partnerships inside China, now navigating a market where its former partners are becoming formidable global competitors in their own right. Tesla, competing directly with BYD and other Chinese manufacturers across multiple global markets, forced into repeated price adjustments to defend market share outside the United States. Keep this in mind, this is not a story about one struggling company. It is a story about an entire legacy industry facing the same structural pressure from a single direction at the same time. This is the part most quarterly earnings calls will not say out loud. Executives at these companies are not blind to any of this. Several have already announced restructuring plans, workforce reductions, and shifts toward joint ventures with Chinese partners rather than head-on competition. Some have quietly begun licensing Chinese battery technology and software platforms rather than trying to outdevelop them independently. That alone tells you how seriously this threat is being taken behind closed doors, even when the public messaging stays calm and confident. Investors watching these companies need to separate two very different signals. Short-term earnings can still look stable, propped up by legacy combustion vehicle sales and cost-cutting measures. Long-term competitive positioning is a different story entirely, and it is the one that determines where valuations head over the next 5 to 10 years. And when an entire industry faces the same pressure simultaneously, the effects rarely stay contained to that industry alone. Zoom out for a moment, because this is where the story stops being about cars entirely. This is not just about vehicles rolling off ships. It is about manufacturing capability at a national scale. It is about who controls the technology stack inside modern transportation, including software and autonomous driving systems. It is about who controls artificial intelligence applied to manufacturing and logistics. It is about who controls battery chemistry and production at industrial scale. It is about who controls access to rare earth materials, essential not just for cars, but for defense technology, renewable energy, and consumer electronics. It is about who controls the energy infrastructure required to power all of it. History gives us a pattern worth remembering here. In the 1980s, Japan's rise in automotive manufacturing was dismissed by many American executives as a temporary low-cost phenomenon. It was not temporary. It reshaped global manufacturing for decades. Detroit's dominance after World War II was built on manufacturing scale, supply chain control, and government support during a specific moment in history. A moment that did not last forever. Whoever dominates the automobile industry rarely dominates automobiles alone. Historically, the country that wins manufacturing tends to shape the industries that grow up around it, from steel to electronics to energy. That is the pattern playing out again, right now, in real time. Most people think this is about electric cars, but they are missing the real story. The real story is about the invisible infrastructure sitting underneath every industry of the next 50 years. Battery chemistry does not just power cars. It powers grid-scale energy storage, which determines how quickly countries can transition their entire electricity systems. Manufacturing robotics does not just build vehicles. It builds the industrial base needed for everything from consumer electronics to defense equipment. Rare earth processing does not just supply automotive motors. It supplies wind turbines, precision-guided systems, and nearly every advanced electronic device made today. So when you watch ships full of cars leaving Chinese ports, you're not just watching an export statistic. You're watching the visible surface of a much deeper industrial foundation, one being built layer by layer underneath nearly every technology that will matter for the rest of this century. So let's circle back to where we started. This story was never really about 1 million exported cars in a single month. That number was simply the moment the shift became too large to ignore. The real story is about who controls the future of manufacturing, who controls batteries, who controls software, who controls autonomous driving, who controls the global supply chains that the next century of transportation will depend on. The next decade will not be decided by who builds the fastest car, or even the cheapest one. It will be decided by who builds the world's cars. And right now, that answer is shifting faster than most people, most executives, and most investors are prepared for. Something is shifting. Most people are still watching the price tags. Few are watching the ports. Fewer still are watching the supply chains underneath all of it. If this video helped you see even a small piece of that shift more clearly, that is exactly what the market continuum is here for. Every week, we take stories like this one, the ones hiding in plain sight, and break down what they actually mean for the future of money, industry, and power. Not hype, not noise, just the patterns worth paying attention to before everyone else catches on. If you want to keep seeing these shifts before they become headlines, subscribe to the market continuum and stay a step ahead of where this is all heading, because the story is far from over, and you just got a little closer to seeing where it goes next.